Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming out. I want to thank you for coming out to this kind of project launch presentation about BPLogix, Process Director. And so just to kick us off, I'd ask Provost Travis to say a few words.
Alrighty, well hello everybody. Nice to see so many people here on a summer's day. I think is it the lollipops that got everybody here? We didn't know they were going to be here. Bonus ones are available at the front here if you want to move down. I just want to thank Joe and Chip will introduce the other folks here from Eau Claire. I would encourage you all, as you learn about this today, to sit there with an open mind and think about your day-to-day activities. And I'm talking primarily to people like dean's assistants and other individuals that do a lot of support work, but all of us in many ways. And this group was targeted as the group that we felt does a lot with paperwork on a daily basis, one way or the other, whether you're initiating paperwork or whether you're approving paperwork and or tracking paperwork. And I can promise you, I came from a campus where we had this opportunity presented to us about 5 years ago, and it really transformed the campus that I came from. It made each individual's jobs much more efficient in dealing with paperwork. From a sustainability perspective, we simply reduced the amount of paperwork. From a financial perspective, we reduced the amount of cost that we spent on mailing things. I mean, there are a lot of advantages here, and these guys are going to go through it. But the thing I want to mention the most is how much I appreciate the partnership with Eau Claire. This is the sort of thing we need to do more of, in my opinion, and I go to provost meetings every month, and we talk about ways that we can help each other. Here's an example of a campus that has already done a lot of this, and so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can learn from their mistakes, the things that they've identified that work best, their best practices, and we have this ongoing partnership. So just want to say again, thank you to all you guys for being here, and thanks to Joe for getting us started. So let's learn.
Great. Like the Provost said, I just wanted to make some introductions and do that first. So a couple different teams involved here. We have our team from UW-River Falls. So myself as a kind of a project sponsor, Pete Reese, if you want to stand up, as the project manager in DOTS. We have process analyst position that we were budget approved for that we're hiring currently. So that's in the works. We have telephone interviews this week, and that's the person that's going to kind of come out and work with different departments and walk through mapping your processes as they get queued up, and then kind of lean them down for efficiency and then put them into this product that will be automated. Behind the scenes, Shane O'Malley-Potting is one of our web team here on campus, so he'll be supporting the back end of BPLogix. Shane's over there. And then Mike Woolsey as well. He's playing cameraman today, so him as well. And then from Eau Claire, we mentioned Chip Eckert, who's the CIO at UW-Eau Claire and the manager of their continuous improvement services. Beth Kranz, who's e-forms and process improvement in that office. Brad Patton, who is doing the process improvement mappings and different things, kind of that position I talked about we're going to have here. And then Mike Scarp, who's on the e-forms and also does a lot of the management of the back end of this BPLogix product. And then really everybody in this room is another part of that team. As the process owners, you're the folks that are going to help us to drive this forward and start working through some of your processes. So one thing I just wanted to mention really quick is kind of this analogy, right? A crawl, walk, run. And so I want to think of this project in that analogy. Right now, our team here at UWRF is learning about this tool, learning about this product, learning how to operate and use it. And we're going to be bringing on a new team member who's not even here yet, and we're hoping that they have a lot of experience, but depends on how much experience they have. They're going to be learning it as well. And that's really where Chip and his team are going to really help us. They've stepped up and said, hey, we want to help you guys with this. That team member is actually going to spend a great deal of time every day at Eau Claire, learning how they do this, learning about their processes, going out to their offices, mapping things, and then going to be able to take that knowledge, come back here, and work. So initially, that's kind of that crawl process. As we move into the walk process, we're going to be working with our team here and Chip's team, coming to this campus and doing process mappings. And initially, some of those are going to be things that are already built or may already be in electronic workflow through a different method. We're going to move those into this product, and we're going to start building some new ones. And we're going to start with really easy ones first. So like that 7-signature payment overload form, I think that might be easy, but Chip and his team advised me, no, that's one of the hardest ones you're going to ever do because there's a lot of things connected on the back end as far as different systems that bring in information. So we're going to try to find some easier forms to work on first and then move forward. Then we get to the run phase of this. That's really where our team here at River Falls can just take this, go with it, start doing multiple process mappings and building things in the background all at the same time. We're not just working in a sequence of 1 or 2. We'll have a dozen going on at the same time. So that's the hope. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and have Chip go ahead and take over, and he's going to talk a little bit more about it.
How the hell did you get a picture of me up there? Chip Hendricks from UW-Eau Claire. First of all, in my mind, Joe gets a lot of credit for this, and a year from now, when you're really happy with what you have, thank Joe. That was his doing to put us together as a partnership. And the partnership, we don't see that ending. We train your person and then that's it. We see that continuing on, working together. Sometimes our students might be involved helping, sometimes our staff might, but I see this as a team approach, not a train once and then you're on your own kind of thing. We also don't intend to make you do things like we do in Eau Claire. We want to do things that's the best way for you. And the biggest thing we put together a couple of years ago was a team called Continuous Improvement Services. You can map something out and you can make it better, but that's not necessarily the best way to do it. And Brad will be talking more about that in a minute. What you want to do is look at the process. We've had meetings where people say they do this, and then we say, why? And dead silence, and everybody looks at everybody and says, well, it was always done that way. But why? Oh yeah, we don't need to do it anymore. So things like that will happen. You'll be surprised how that works. Mike has had 13 years experience working with BPLogix. The first mistake we made when we brought it up is we did the EPARF. If you have friends at Stevens Point or Milwaukee, they tried to do the same thing. And both of those campuses, one I don't think has it working yet a year later, and the other one it's marginal maybe. So that's why we really are stressing you want to start with simple forms first, learn, get people used to it. And it's funny because at Eau Claire, when we first started eForms, our clients didn't like it. They don't remember not liking it anymore because now they love it. But initially, people didn't really understand what all it could do for you. It doesn't just speed things up. You can make changes quickly to it. You can tell at a second where the form is at if it's sitting on somebody's desk. It points out lots of different things. And rather than me tell you all that, we just have a short... Before I do that, can you go to the Qualtrics? One of the things with continuous improvement we do, and we'll set that up with you guys too, is anytime we meet for a mapping session or set a form up, we send this real short survey out to people to find out how we're doing, and that's how we get better at it. Don't have to go through all of it, but the vast majority really like it. Somebody finally said they hated it, which was good because it looked like it was a marketing gimmick with everything being positive. But we do follow up. If they want to put their name down, we'll go talk to them about it because anybody can always get better. And you always learn as time goes on. New things come up, different things happen, new requirements from state, federal government, things change. So the next then, if we can do a real short video, and these are our actual users of eForms on our campus and people that have used our process mapping service.
It means that when I initiate a document, I no longer have to send it through intercompany mail. It will immediately go to the next person that needs to sign off on the document.
So now that I've done it once, I'm looking at all of our other processes and identifying why are we walking paper around? Why can't we just create an e-form? And is there an e-form that we've already created that we could just copy, paste over, add the required fields, remove out fields that aren't relevant for this? It's already done in most cases because processes are so similar across campus.
It saved a lot of time for me when I don't need to walk across
call UW-Eau Claire just to find a person to submit my application. I can just do that within a few clicks, and that saves a lot of time for me.
But also, I just feel like the transparency. Previously, when there's a paper form, and there may have to be 3 approvals after it was initiated, you would never know where it was, whose desk it was held up on. With the e-forms, you know what the routing order is, the next person gets an email courtesy notification, there's a form or something waiting for some approval or action.
The first one is, I would definitely get with a mapping expert, process mapping expert, because he asks the questions to help us think through what is the actual process. We know a form gets here and here, but what happens in between? So understanding the process behind it, really.
We will search through Knowledge View and look for what did we do in the past so that when we consistently build those stipend payments.
And in the Knowledge View, you can pull off a CSV file. And so we pulled that CSV file, we opened it up, and we grabbed the student ID number.
Knowledge view is helpful, then I can look back and did I really submit it? Did I think about it, but did I actually do it? The other reason I love Knowledge View is sometimes when I put in a form, I think back and go, wow, I have the same situation. I really like the wording I used on that previous one. Right? I can go back to that form and just kind of copy and paste the wording again, so I don't have to reinvent the wheel, so to speak.
So yes, e-form is going to be a better way to process any form application. I love the accuracy that's afforded by the e-forms pulling students or faculty or administrators from campus.
There have been huge efficiencies.
21st century, do it.
And one that was interesting is when Carol was up there, she works in our College of Education, and she got promoted into upper management where she didn't want to be. And we had a number of e-forms there, and she said, well, I don't want to use them anymore, I want to go back to paper. And within 2 months? Yeah, anyway, then she was not only back to what we had, is what else can you do to help me with it? And now she's an advocate of it for us. But that was something initially that I don't like computers, I want to talk face to face, I want to have paper. And she quickly turned around with the workload that they had coming at them. Brad, you want to be next?
Sure.
Okay, Brad Patton, he's the one that does the mapping for us.
So, you're going to be getting this cool tool, BPLogix, e-forms. We call them, by the way, if I say e-form, I mean BPLogix. It's kind of like, that's in our brains now, we can't get it out of there. E-form is e-form. It's a campus thing now. One of the things that's probably important to know is what's the purpose of actually doing a mapping. So why go through all the steps of making this thing built out? And the first one is a bad process made digital is still just a bad process. We've had a number, probably our earlier e-forms anyway, were probably based on exactly what the client said they wanted, and it was probably based on the exact same setup they had before, and it was probably just as inefficient, but now it's digitally inefficient. And so it's good to actually meet and try to see where you can find improvement in each of the processes you're working on. The other is to document the workflow required in the e-form. So one of the people in the video said they like to know what the process actually looks like. It's easier for them to be able to see this thing mapped out, and they will better understand how the e-form is supposed to work. And not only is it making it easier for them, it's easier for the people who are building the e-form itself when they kind of have those blueprints ahead of time. So I use Visio when I do this. I do it on the fly. I'll ask them a lot of, okay, what's next, or who's doing this? And they get used to the process after a little bit of time when working with me. Client understanding how the e-form will route, that's very important. So it might make more sense how inefficient a process is once they've had a chance to see what they're intending to do with this thing mapped out. If it goes back to one person 3 times in the process, not only is that person going to get annoyed, but it becomes pretty clear that there might be a faster way to do this. So understanding the route is really important in the mapping process. Also, you'll find that you probably do not need to do a mapping if the e-form you're creating does not have a workflow associated with it. So if it's a simple piece of paper that a person needs to submit and they would like it just to route to someone's email box, you might not have to go through the whole mapping process. This is when you're talking about workflow. It's going to this person, and based on this criteria, this condition, then it's going over to this person. And then there's 3 types of mappings that I've done so far. One is just for documentation's sake. A group of people don't know how a process works. Maybe one person understands a little bit of it, someone else understands another piece of it, and collectively we can actually document it, what it is. This has been helpful when there's turnover and people aren't sure, they've owned this thing for years, now that person's gone. Well, they'd like to be able to have this thing actually written out. It's also helpful for onboarding too, depending on what the process might be. Another is for improvement. So someone knows that a process is not very efficient. So they meet with me and we try to find ways that we can make it a little bit more lean. So that's another reason we do mappings. And then lastly, for arbitration. So you got 2 groups of people who don't agree as how the process should work. You get them to agree long enough to make a map, and then that map kind of serves as a contract in order to get people to say, well, look at the process. And what's nice is the map then becomes the bad guy. You can blame the map, like, well, we're just following the rules that we came up with. This is the contract we made. So not a lot of that, but some of the maps I make are all 3. They want it documented, they need to improve it, and everyone needs to play nice because this new piece of digital, the digital map we create. So the other part of my job is the process. So the first thing I do is I meet with the champion for the process. It doesn't have to be somebody that's high up in administration. It doesn't have to be someone even in the middle. It could be the person that's using it the most. Some of the mappings we do might seem inconsequential, but it might change one person's life at the university because it's going to make something that much more efficient for them. And so we'll determine the purpose of the process, and then with that champion, we'll determine who needs to be at the table in this mapping. And you don't want to bring 20 people in to a mapping. There's too many people, too many opinions, you're not going to get anywhere. I've done them before, but there's no magic number. It seems like 5 is pretty good. So you've got the champion there, you've got the person who's going to be doing a lot of the input into this process, and those who are affected. Those are the kinds of folks you'd want to involve in this mapping process. Next is to schedule the meeting. And I normally do 2-hour lengths, which seems like a lot, but you don't get really rolling until about 35, 40 minutes into it, and people understand how I work along the process. And after 2 hours, I start glazing over and, they're on to other ideas in their head. So 2 hours seems to be a pretty good number. Getting the room is important, making sure that it's got a projector. Like I said, I use Visio and I do it on the fly. That was difficult to manage at first. We used to do the long piece of butcher block paper and the sticky notes, and that's really nice for a little while until you roll it up and the sticky notes start to move other places. And you want to find stuff digitally later. Well, we used to have like a whole cabinet area filled with rolled up papers, and I'm like, no, we can't keep doing that. And when it's projected, you can actually see where I've got typos, or I wrote the wrong thing and I've got 5 to 20 eyes saying, no, you fix that one right there. So I look for a room that's got a projector and also has Visio installed in it. So my process then, when I'm working with the participants in the mapping, is I explain what the different shapes mean in the workflows that we use. We only use 2 or 3 because we want to make this easy. It's really their map, it's not my map. And so I'll say that to them all the time. I'll say, what I'm typing needs to make sense to you. It doesn't need to make sense to me. And so trying to keep it as simple as possible, something that they'll actually look at again after we're done meeting with them. I'll explain the purpose of what the current and the future states are and how we find the gaps in between. And I introduce the idea of what I call the ideal state. So sometimes they're not sure if they're just going to reinvent this whole thing. They're going to explode the process and start over. I'll say, let's start with an ideal state then. Ideally, it would do this. And when reality hits and we blow some of the fairy dust off our ideal state, we'll actually land on a future state that they'll be able to implement. So in this process, my role is to ask a lot of questions, and dumb questions on purpose. Either I'm trying to spark more conversation or I just really am dumb about their process. I was a history education major, so once we started talking about like a high-level finance things, I'm kind of like, help, ask a lot of questions. And it also gets people to realize, I'm not sure why we did that, like Chip was saying. Had somebody that was filling out the same piece of paper for 11 years, didn't actually need it because it was going into a bin of no one ever reads this. And it took a lot of their time up, and no one really asked the question, why are we doing this? And we asked the question, then they stopped doing that, saved them a lot of time. I make a lot of assumptions, partially to help speed along the process, because if I'm just waiting for every word that they tell me to write down, it kind of grinds to a standstill. So I'll make some assumptions, and that's where I want them to correct me. And I'm also an outsider too, so making assumptions is a good idea, I think, because maybe it might be a different way of thinking that will jostle something, or I'll be the idiot in the room, and that's okay too. And then the most important thing that I do is I capture their ideas and their pain points. So I'll show you a map in just a little bit. We call them pink notes. I'll take one of the boxes in pink so it stands out. And when someone says, oh, I hate this part of the process, or this is just the worst, it eats up all my time, that's where I'm like, okay, I gotta better start typing down what they said. And so a map that's just riddled with pink notes is a good thing because it means there's lots of opportunities for improvement. Whenever I do a mapping and it's just nothing on there, just their boxes and no pink notes, I'm like, okay, this was a documentation map. This was not an improvement map. So those juicy bits of goodness are those pink notes that I can wring out. The client's role in these mappings is to be involved. If you're one of the 5 to 20 people that are involved, hopefully not 20, we ask them to participate, especially if they're the person who owns the process the most. We want to hear their feedback, so it's got to be an environment that's safe to vent, right? The right people have to be there so you can vent your problems, so we can first of all capture those, and so that they can, their opinions are heard. Thinking outside the box, this is the way we've always done it, is kind of the death of some of these future state maps you try to do. You got to think outside the box for a little bit, because what matters is what triggers the process and what's the desired outputs of the process. Theoretically, everything in between doesn't matter. The client probably doesn't give a crap, but what happens between their getting HR hiring process. I was involved in a mapping one time, and I wasn't mapping it, but I love the way they posed this. They were saying, what's the purpose of this? No, it was the employment payment process, that's what it was. And they said, what's the purpose of the process? And one person said, to get paid. That's a good idea. They wrote that down as one of the desired outputs. Another person said, to track some of their data related to payments. Sure, we'll put that down. One said to fill in timesheets, and he goes, no. The purpose of the payment process is not to fill in timesheets. That's just a vehicle to get there. So in the meantime, think there's no such thing as timesheets anymore. And their minds are like, how are we going to do this? He's asking them to think outside the box. Obviously, they're going to have to still do some timesheets with some people, but that's the way you got to think about it when you're involved. And lastly, to be patient. So it all depends on how chatty the room is and how many problems there actually are with the process. I do 2-hour mappings, and I've been involved in a bigger process that took 5 meetings. So it's 10 hours. How many people are in the room? And you might think, this is a really expensive thing that's happening. This map is like $1,000 right now, But I would encourage people to be patient, expect multiple meetings if they're required. Because sometimes just the current state might take 2 meetings. And then you're going to talk about the ideal or the future state, and that might take 2 meetings. So yes, schedule further meetings if required. And the last thing I kind of do is, if they're in need of a project manager type person, I've had that role before where all the pink notes that we've had, I'll put into a single list, and that kind of becomes a project plan, really. I mean, it's all the things that need to take place before that future state is realized. And so in that role, I've been the person asking folks if they have met that task yet, and if yes, then I'll record that they have, and I'll kind of go through that role. I don't do that as often, but I recommend somebody on that team is that person to make sure that the good ideas they've come up with in the future state they'd like to implement is actually done. So that's kind of my role in this whole thing. All right.
You're going to bring up the map, or?
Oh yeah, let me show you
And
that. real
while
quick.
he's doing that, Brad touched on it a little bit, but when we do mappings, we don't take sides, we be totally neutral on it. and Brad made the comment before about asking dumb questions. I don't know if you guys have seen the trailer lately for the Golden Girls, but where I think it was Betty White said, "Can I ask a stupid question?" And I think it's Maud, the other one said like no other.
Yeah.
But lots of times Brad will do it on purpose to get the discussion going, because what we've seen in the past is sometimes people that have the best ideas don't talk in a meeting. They sit there and listen. And Brad excels at bringing those people's comments out.
There we go. So I'm not going to read any of these to you. I'm just going to give you a high-level view. This is an existing process that we already had in BPLogix that we were looking to improve. And so you're going to see all these pink notes everywhere. It might be just another reason to not start with something gigantic when you're building these BPLogix forms in the walk phase. This is just a ton of questions related to the hiring process. And imagine this on butcher paper with Post-it notes and seeing how fun that would have been to keep and roll up every time. But, I mean, this was just the current state, and it was bigger. Theoretically, a future state will be smaller. So the future has plenty of pink notes. Some of these may have been done already, or have been tackled already. What I try to do is I will mark on my pink note if it's an e-form related thing, so that the e-form person's got a chance to say, oh, I can clearly see that I'm going to need to fix the form here. But again, this is for an existing process that was already in BPLogix that we were working on. And to make it easier on the group, I turned it into some swim lanes so you could see what the full process looks like instead of a linear pattern. And this would be our hiring process that we have on our campus. So this has been really helpful, by the way, for groups that are doing things that happen every time during a month. Like, for example, we've got this Eau Claire Jazz Festival. It was a documentation type map where not everyone knew how to do what to do or when to do it, but one person did. And so we made all these different horizontal lanes for the responsible person, and then all these vertical columns for the month that the events would take place. So they would know in March, I've got to do such and such before we're ready to do this next thing. And so they've got this printed off on their wall, and they just walk up to it and read it. So this is a good example of the documentation map, or what a documentation map could be.
Mike?
Yep.
We take a quick 5 minutes to let the room ask any questions they might have so far, because we've been giving you a lot of information. So open up if anyone has questions or comments or anything. Dave?
Do you want to share just with the group briefly the plans for the position that we will have dedicated to this responsibility? Because I don't want people thinking this is going to be an add-on. I mean, we have Pete and others that are going to be helping with this, but this is a relationship with Eau Claire with a new position as well.
Yep, so the position we're hiring is a process mapper, process analyst. That's currently in the interview state right now. That position will interact with Eau Claire initially, really be on their campus learning all this process mapping activity. That's going to come back here to River Falls, and that person's going to be the one, like Brad, visiting your offices, working with you, doing the process mapping, doing the majority of what you saw on the screen there. They're still going to be asking you those questions. They're going to still have those 2-hour meetings, whatever that might look like. But they're going to be taking that information, working with you, taking that information, bringing it back to the team, Pete and Mike and Shane and all those, to really build these processes. And they'll be doing some of that as well. And I think really initially with Eau Claire and our partnership, they're going to be mentoring us on doing all of that. We're going to be learning from them. So they're going to be here on campus, a few times, working with us, sitting in dots, going through building these processes. So,
Thank you.
yes.
Do you already have an idea of any sort of high volume, low complexity forms that you have on the top of your list that we might want to be thinking about, that you might start with?
Right. So I think, initially, like I said, in our kind of crawl phase, we're going to be looking at some forms that already exist. I can't tell you specifically what those might be. We use Common Spot has, a forms function, our website that collects information and then produces these CSV files. Some of those, we have a system called Footprints on Campus that we would like to see sunset because it's something that we used to use as a ticketing system. We don't use any longer, but we have a few offices here in the room that do use it. But we're looking at those. And then just